Hey everyone, so to recap, my name is Brittany Park. I work for Leeway Engineering, but when I signed up to do this, I worked for the city of Bend, so plot twist there. But yeah, so I'm going to tell you guys today a little bit about my experience working with the public side on the city of Bend, which I think like the reason why you work with a public agency is because, especially for like a city agency, I think it's really cool to be able to directly have impact on the community that you live in. And I found it like super easy to be passionate about everything I was doing because I knew directly who I was impacting. And you also get the really cool chance to be involved with not only like the project itself and doing your engineer work, but there's also like a level of like dealing with the politics of the city, and so you get this kind of like holistic look at your project, like what does the community want you to do, how can you implement what the community wants to do, what's realistic, and then you get to see these projects go from like we need this to like help innovate what that is to solve that problem. Like we have this problem, how do we solve it? And it's in your own community. So it's really cool to work for a public agency. At least I thought it was. I was very, very passionate about what I did. It was actually my dream job. I went back for my master's to work at a public agency, and in particular, City of Bend. I mentioned before I worked in the pulp and paper field, and I quit my job to go get my master's, and my boss was like, wait, so you're quitting your job to go pay for a master's to make less and work for a public agency? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, okay. So anyways, I think that is like some of the greatest parts of working for a public agency is just that you have that so much impact on your community. So when I worked at the city of Bend, I was a project engineer. We had a couple different departments for engineering. One did the private development side, which is kind of like reviewing plans as they come in for private development. So new housing, new industry, things like that. And then there was the public side, which is what I worked in, which was the infrastructure engineering department. And so we did all the capital improvement projects for the city of Bend. And my role in particular, I did wastewater projects. And so we'd be assigned different projects, and then you would take that project from like an idea through the like planning and design and then construction and then until it was done. So you just got these projects and they were like your little baby, and you got to take them through all the phases of the project. So as a project manager, I was a project manager. So as a project manager, it was kind of cool, and there's so many different things you can do for public agencies. So this is my experience and my role. That being said, this is probably very different for many of the different roles you can work in the public agencies. Like I know Portland in particular, Brittany probably can speak on it. You're kind of more like you have like your subject area expertise and you work in kind of one of a smaller area, where the city of Bend, we had kind of a smaller staff. So everyone wore a ton of hats and did everything. And so it just kind of depends on what you work and what your role is. But for me at the city of Bend, as a project manager, we wore a whole bunch of different hats because we saw our same projects through all stages. And so, during the stages, you got your planning, your design, and then construction is kind of your big stages of a project. So during like the design stage, so you hired everyone that would work on your project. So you needed to go out and hire your design engineers, like your Brown and Caldwells, and your Jacobs, and then you would also and then you'd also hire your contractors. So you did that hiring part. So you kind of had your procurement hat. Also in the design, you had, you just project managed the design, reviewing the specifications and the actual designs that the engineers were producing, making sure it met the needs of the city. You'd also have this hat of like public agent, where you'd go out and have public meetings and be like, hey guys, we're doing this project, like we're going to tear up your street. You're going to get really mad at us. And like, how can we make this better for you? Like, we want to make sure your trash still gets taken out. And like, we got 6 months to talk about this. You can yell at me anytime, So you had that like, public interface part. I am an extrovert, so that was probably my favorite part of the job, which I think is unique to engineering, is that you at the public at work in a public agency, you do have this huge element of your job that is like basically customer focused, customer service based. So you're talking to the public and making sure that they're happy and that their needs met. And I actually really loved that part of my job. I loved being able to talk to the public. And then also you had like your right of way agent hat. So you'd have to go to people and be like, hey, we're going to do this project in your front yard. Can we buy some land from you? And then negotiate they're buying their land, or temporary construction easements we'd have a lot of those, so like negotiating to use their land, rental fee is kind of what a temporary construction easement is. So you negotiate getting those paperwork done and signed off by the property owners. And then also so when you got through your design, you would also not only project manage the construction of your project, you would also be the construction manager of your project. So that meant you were like going out in the field, inspecting it, making sure the project was going well, talking to the contractors, seeing what kind of issues they had, approving different submittals that they had, like are they using the right type of pipe? Like they call you because they hit a water line and there's water gushing all over the ground and you got to figure out what to do. So there was also the construction management hat that you wore. So yeah, project management, there was a lot of different things going on all the time, and it just depended on what phase of the project that your project was in, what we were doing. So I worked at my main projects. I had the pump station decommission project. So we were taking pump stations. We had a lot of pressure sewer in the city of Bend, and so we were pumping around all our sewer, which is really takes a lot of energy and it's a lot of maintenance to keep up. So we're converting pressure sewer into gravity sewer. So gravity did all the work for us. And so during my time there, I decommissioned 10 different pump stations and we installed gravity sewer to do that. And then also my biggest project was our solid stream at the wastewater treatment plant needed to upgrade it. And so I was project managing the solids handling project. And I love that project. My background before this too it's always been in wastewater treatment. I love wastewater treatment. I'm such a nerd about it, and I love processes. I think they're super exciting and fascinating, and there's a lot of chemistry and biology that goes on in them. So that's where my passions lie, and so I love that project. We had to upgrade the whole solid stream process, and it was really cool to be able to work through that project. So those were my two main projects I had at the city. Something different between public life and private is that, like, because you have these projects that are like your baby and you spend so much time on it, you'll have one project for like 3 years. So I had like 2 to 3 projects at a time, and I would be on those same projects for 3 years, right? So my resume for my time at City of Bend, I have like 4 projects on it, whereas like when you're in private consulting side, you're working on like 10 projects at the same time. You're just multitasking like crazy, and a lot of times you'll have very minor roles on projects, and so you get to touch a lot of different subjects at once and a lot of different projects at once, which is really cool for exposure, but you don't have as in-depth you don't get like as in-depth involved in the projects. So that's one big difference, is like your resume from a consulting engineer will have a lot more projects in it in a short span of time, versus like public side, it's, you just spend a lot of time on your main projects. And then so day in the life. So when I would start in the morning, I did my usual coordination, like emailing people, hey, how are things going? Oh, you need this meeting, set up my meetings, read my emails, respond to emails. And then after that, I would spend usually time like reviewing plans and specs and making sure that everything looked good, or like writing RFPs, requests for proposals, to hire different design engineers, kind of more of my like heavy like focus items. And then the afternoons I would usually spend in the fields, like talking to Roy and being like, or like going to the construction site and seeing like how's it going, what's going wrong. Spending a lot of time in out at the treatment plant, walking the site, etc. Yeah, it changed every day. Like it was really cool as far as that, and variety. Like I wasn't always in my office. There was a huge variety of what I did, so you can be out and about. Yeah, it was great. One of the great things about public side too is you got a really good work-life balance, like at 5 everyone leaves and like no one's bothering you at 4 a.m. in the morning for something. Like it's really great. Like so I really loved the work-life balance that public sector had. I mean, people worked hard when they were at work, but it tended to be like not as, it didn't really like overflow into your evenings and weekends as much. And so yeah, that's another great thing. So and then Sam wanted me to go over kind of what, or like as an entry level, what you'd see at a public agency versus like, you know, mid-level. So for City of Bend, once again, very specific to where I worked, our entry level you would be paired with another project manager, and you would work as like you'd be helper to them on their project. So you'd have a PM that was assigned a project, and then you'd be assigned that project as well, and you would assist in things, because a lot of the projects, which was kind of cool, because the bigger projects are the ones that needed more than one engineer on it. So typically, as you started out, you got to be on the really cool big projects, and so it was really great exposure right off the bat. So yeah, you'd be assisting that PM with various tasks on those projects. And then once you're about like 5 years in is about when you'd start getting assigned your own projects, and then you'd be project managing projects on your own. So that's kind of the difference between one and first year and 5 years. And then another difference, kind of as I'm sprinkling in these differences between consulting life and public life, is that there's not as much growth in the public side of things. So you may end up doing the same job for a long time, because your staff's not as big. Whereas like, you know, big consulting firms, you have a lot of staffs, and so you have a lot of upward mobility. So I'd say a little less on average upward mobility in public life than consulting life. But yeah, that's kind of a summary. Once again, I love working for public side. I think it's really great to be able to influence your community. I also worked for City of Redmond way back when I first started my career. And then I also did, I mentioned, we haven't really taught, we don't have one of these in here, but I worked for heavy industry, I mentioned, for a little bit too. And that's another career path that you can choose if you decide to. There's, you know, industry creates wastewater too, and they also need water. So there's a lot of industries that you can even work for in the water and wastewater sector as well, working at industrial wastewater treatment plants, for example. So there's also that as like another like place you can go work, that we kind of haven't mentioned yet. But yeah, anyways, so that is probably my too long of intro into public work life. And I'm gonna go to the questions now. Let's see who asked me questions. Question for Brittany. Do you think your time in private industry helped you in, oh, is that old, or is that from the, you know, this one? Do you think your time in private industry helped you in your career on the public side, and now vice versa? Has your public career helped you in private consulting? Yes. Yes, definitely. So yeah, they all play off each other, and they're all interconnected. And so Sam can speak on this too, because he's just transferred over to the different side too. I think I'm the type of person that I like to have like a wide depth of like various different things that I'm exposed to. And I find that if you work in these different fields and the different parts but in the same industry, they're all kind of connected together. So like even like working heavy industry, I learned a ton there. They had a lot of resources, so they trained us really well because they had a lot of money, which is great. So it's perfect to go towards the beginning of my career. And like all of those skills I learned there, like, you know, managing, just understanding wastewater treatment in general, those are all applied to your future other places you go. So I don't think it matters where you start. I don't think there is a right place to start. I don't think there's a right place to end. As we go, like, choose your own adventure.
And Brittany, I think just above the one you read, Elizabeth Thorley, she asked, what was your master's in? Is this a common requirement for working in the public sector? Oh,
yeah, so my master's was in infrastructure engineering and management. I don't think it's a common requirement. They usually prefer it. I really wanted to work for the City of Bend. I'm from here too. So, and it's really competitive because everyone wants to live in Bend. So I knew I needed to get my master's to break into this market here. So that's why I went back for it. I don't think you need to if you're like have if you're interested in living in more than one place, which I was stubborn on. But it does help, like as we went through in the beginning, like if you have more certifications, it always helps your application look a little better, but it's not required. Some of my coworkers started at the City of Bend without master's degrees. It's definitely not required. And then let's see here. At the City of Boise, we see people go to school for Masters of Public Admin. The city has tuition reimbursement, so they don't typically do it beforehand, but while they're at work. There you go. Haley answered my question. So they don't typically see people go get their master's ahead of time. Oh, what sort of training did Bend have for the entry level? So yeah, for City of Bend, you had to have for project engineer, you have to have a PE and then master's degree and a PMP, which is why I mentioned it earlier, professional management. Project management certification is also like something they prefer, but it's not required. And then they had like I can't remember what it was called, like a staff engineer level that was one below, and it only required an EIT, but they did require the EIT for that. All places do. Oh, okay. Sam said, how did you come to work in heavy industry? Is that what you originally wanted to do with your chemical engineering degree? I always wanted to work in wastewater. I'm weird. I like wastewater. I find it super interesting. Like that's like what I was drawn to in my school and my internships when I was in undergrad. So I definitely like that. I did not expect to end up in heavy industry. That happened just because I was trying to steal free pens from the table at the job career because I was out of pens. And while I was trying to steal a free pen, I was forced to talk to the people at the table. And found out that they do a lot of wastewater treatment. And then lo and behold, I ended up working there. So it was really serendipitous and kind of funny because I knew like I wanted to work in wastewater, but I didn't ever expect like pulp and paper is where I would end up. So yeah, and I got the free pen in case you guys were worried. But yeah,
that's awesome.
That's how I ended up in heavy industry. I actually really liked it. Yeah, because it was probably my favorite job ever, just because you had so much resources and like industry is at least the one I was working for was always worried about getting shut down, and so they were like, our environmental department, like, sure, you request for something, here's some money, so you could be super innovative and like be like, oh, we need this, so like, great, here, have some more money, like, and so I thought it was a really great place to start my career, and they like trained me. I like got like all these certifications. I was like asbestos inspector certified, lead inspector certified, like anyways, I got all this crazy training that I would have probably never ever gotten in the public sector first, because they had like a lot more resources to throw at their employees and they really tried to retain their employees. Yeah, I thought it was a really great experience. Not for everyone, but I loved it. And I also felt like I was making the world still a better place because I was cleaning the water before I got into the water. I felt guilty about like working for industry, but then I was like, I'm cleaning their water. Like, it's still good. So yeah, and then do you think it's easier to get projects started working as the engineer of a city? For example, I saw a street that needed to be needed rehab. Could you present that to the city to work on? Sorry, I'm just thinking. So she's asking basically, was it easier to get projects started? It depended. So like wastewater projects, it was a lot easier as a city employee, because I could be like, hey guys, like, you're not optimizing your treatment here. You could like, maybe we should look at like reducing our energy, like our energy use here, or like maybe we could add more efficient pumps here, and then like those would be like more likely to get on the CIP, capital improvement projects plan for the future. So like that was the area I was working in, and so that was, I kind of had more control and I could suggest things and they might actually end up somewhere. As far as like things I wasn't working on, which I'm a bike commuter, And I was always like, there's so many intersections. I was like, why don't they have a crosswalk here, you know? And I would tell our planners like, hey guys, you really need to put a crosswalk here, and we really need a better bike turn lane here. And they would just look at me like I was crazy. So I didn't have that quite effect on that. Everyone thinks they're a transport engineer though, which is funny, like in the public side, like poor transportation engineers, like everyone in the public sees transportation and they think they know what's best, and they just get to hear like everyone's ideas all the time, which is nice. On the water and wastewater side, no one really like sees it, so they don't have opinions about it as much. Let's see here.
Yeah, the pipes are underground, so you can't see that. It's when it starts spewing up when we have a problem.
Exactly. That's the only time you hear about it.
Yeah, Brittany, I think that's just Haley signing off, and then Mary Lou is asking if you know Lindsay Kromsick.
Yeah, how do you know Lindsay?
Her and I went to school together. We're both from Cal Poly.
No way.
Yeah, we were really good friends, and then she moved away, and we hardly keep in touch now. But yeah, she's very good friends.
She's actually one of my best friends, so.
Awesome. Can you tell her I said hi? I haven't talked to her in a while.
I will tell her that you said hi. That's hilarious. Yeah, she's wonderful, and she still works at the City of Ed, and is probably one of the most brilliant engineers.
Nice. And then I think I saw that Erin had her hand up.
I can't type a chat in without turning the video off. So I had actually some questions I might follow up later with you about your solids improvement projects, because I was like, whoa, I have a lot of questions about that.
No worries.
But I guess I'll make it more general by asking, it sounds like when you were in industry, you had a lot more room and budget for innovation and for trying different things, and that it was faster. Do you feel like at the City of Bend and in cities in general that you have room for research and innovation, or is that more on your own time and then you bring it to your work?
I guess it depends on where you live, and yeah, I think you did. Like, I had time for it. Like, it was kind of a slower pace than private industry, to be honest. So I definitely had time for like research and innovation. The problem is that like everything's so bureaucratic that like it's hard to convince people that like your innovative ideas should be funded. And so that's kind of the limitations there. And like also public agencies move a little slower. And so like if you have like a great innovative idea, you could like really push for it, but it might take like 10 years before you see anything happen. So I think that's kind of the difference is like, but you know, in your own projects, like the project I had, like if the project was already funded, you did have like some innovation within the project, but you have a scope that you have to like keep to. But there was that ability to like kind of like, you know, for your small scope, like be innovative within that scope. And I actually do like that about the public side, because the private side that I'm in now, like the city just tells you what they want and you have to do it. Whereas like working on the public side, you kind of still got to have like more of that innovative control of your own project. Like, hey, like, why don't we try this? Or like Roy would tell me like, Brittany, that's such a dumb idea. Why are they doing it that way? Why don't they do this? And I'm like, oh yeah. And then I could like actually change the scope to add that, you know? So, so yeah, there's that. Within your own project, you can be innovative.
Yeah, fun fact, Brittany Park is actually a subcontractor on one of the projects I'm working on for City of Portland.
Yeah.
So we're working on a project together.
I didn't know about it until I went to the first kickoff meeting and I was like, whoa, Brittany.
So. Very small world in wastewater, I will say this. Very, very small world. Yeah.
Cool. So if we don't have any other questions for Brittany, then we can move on to Mary Lou.
Right. Hi,
and
everyone.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you so much. That was awesome.
So hi, everyone. My name is Mary Lou, and I work at Brown and Caldwell, and I'm an environmental engineer working on wastewater projects. And so, like Brittany mentioned, a consulting firm is who gets hired by a public agency or at times even private companies. For example, we have projects with Chevron or Pepsi or Walmart for different wastewater or private projects with them. And this usually happens when the public agency just doesn't have enough staff to support, you know, an engineering design or some type of analysis, or they don't have the specific expertise. So a consulting firm has sometimes a few more resources than a public agency would. And then, so yeah, as a consultant, you know, we, or Brown and Caldwell within the consulting world is considered a medium-sized firm. It has about 1,500 employees, and consulting firms also range, you know, when I think about big firms, I think about Black & Veatch and Tetra Tech, and those firms, you know, they have international offices, so it sounds like there's opportunity for travel internationally, and they have lots and lots of resources. And then there's the smaller end of consulting firms, and I've never worked at a small consulting firm, but we've had people come from there to BC, and it sounds like at a small consulting firm, right off the bat, you wear a lot of hats just because there's not as many staff. So you could be your own CAD person and also doing the report writing and also doing the hydraulic modeling. So there's a lot. And I guess at Brown and Caldwell personally, you know, we also, I personally like that as a medium-sized firm, you know, it's not that we're so big and you get lost within the weeds and, you know, your supervisor supervises 20 people. It's pretty easy to access, even like your CEO. You know, I've emailed him about him before and he's been really responsive. So it's also very interesting to see the kind of access you have when it's not a huge, big firm. And let's see, what else did I have on my notes here? So I guess a little bit about my background is just that I heard about engineering through a high school teacher, and then I went into environmental, but while I was at Cal Poly, there's a big emphasis on wastewater, so I was exposed to a lot of wastewater projects right off the bat, and that's how I also got really excited about wastewater. I knew that's what I wanted. What I've heard is that's not normal. A lot of the people that have gotten hired after me or come to Brown and Caldwell, they don't know what they want to do. You know, and that's okay. I personally have found that at Brown and Caldwell, like I knew I wanted to do wastewater, but I still was curious, like I wonder what, you know, an infrastructure project looks like. So it's been easy to shift or raise your hand to work on other projects if they sound interesting. And I know a lot of the supervisors highly encourage anyone new to, you know, even though you're in the wastewater group, that doesn't mean that's the only work you have to do. We have like water resources, which is, you know, still dealing with wastewater, more very high level planning and potable water, and also sometimes dealing with more of the legislature behind it. And then there's also like a heavy design. You know, someone who really wants to work on the plans and the specs. And there might also be another branch of, I'm really more interested in like the process modeling. So this is kind of pre-planning to the engineer, you know, the hardcore design work. There's usually biowind modelers, and these people are usually pretty specialized at our company. And then, you know, there's also, at Brown Caldwell, we also have like infrastructure, which is really conveyance in or out of a wastewater treatment plant, so all your pipelines. So, you know, there's a lot of different avenues, and it doesn't mean that because you're interested in wastewater, it means one thing. It could still be a lot of things, and it's okay to not know. Highly recommend exploring, and if you can get plugged into as many projects as you can, taking advantage of it. And let's see, I guess the differences between from when my early on in my career to now, like Brittany said, at the beginning, I was plugged into a lot of projects. I don't even know. There was a lot, and there was little pieces to them. Probably my favorite project at the beginning was this pilot project that we had out in Sacramento. It was a 0.1 MGD secondary process plant, a BNR plant, and Brown and Caldwell had been hired for Sacramento Regional to basically design and operate this BNR because they were thinking about implementing it full scale, but they wanted to get their staff very acquainted with how this would work, and they also wanted us to test different operation modes, specifically with disinfection, and it turned out that we were able to do enough analyses and pilot studies to show that they could operate, the new filters that they were going to put in at a higher loading, solid or higher loading rate, and then that would save them a lot of footprint. So I think it ended up saving them like $100 million because we were able to do this small pilot project. It helped them really figure out what they wanted to do full scale, but it was very interesting. It was very hands-on. I would say, like I said, it can vary. It can vary from creating the plans and specs to getting to do field work and pilot work, which is pretty cool about consulting, that it's very dynamic. You can do a lot of things. There are ebbs and flows, like Brittany mentioned. There are times when, unfortunately, I do work on the weekend. It's not expected of me. I've never been told by anyone you have to work on the weekend, but just realizing what my workload is, it's like, yeah, I'm going to do it. So it is sometimes challenging to manage the work balance or have a good work balance. And at times, getting more experience with setting the boundaries, I think, will happen as I keep progressing, but that's still something I'm working on as well. And let's see, and there's a lot of opportunities in consulting. You don't have to wait for a certain role to be open to take on. I've been with Brown and Caldwell 6 years, but I started managing projects 3 years in. So, it wasn't because I had to wait for someone to leave. It just, there was a need, and I was excited about the work, and I was already involved. And so there's a lot of opportunities to try new roles early on sometimes. I don't know if that's necessarily normal everywhere, but if that's something interesting. And then something else that I guess I did want to point out about consulting was just that there is a lot. So aside from all of the engineering work, there is a sales side, which is when a city of Bend or city of Portland puts out a request for a proposal. Brown and Caldwell, all these consulting firms, they should already know that it's coming out, but there's a lot of pre-work that happens, and I didn't realize this. When I first started working at a consulting firm, that, oh yeah, we must have won these projects somehow. So I've also been involved now in the past year and a half more on the sales side, but if that's something that also interests you, after you get your feet wet with engineering, that's also very rewarding and interesting. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. There's a lot of meeting with the clients ahead of time, vetting some initial ideas, and that way when an RFP comes out, a consulting firm hopefully is not surprised, and they can get straight to work. And usually, again, these are very short time frames that you have to turn around a proposal, and a proposal would be essentially you're applying for a job, and you're just trying to put out there what are your best ideas, why they should hire you. And then if you get shortlisted, you go to an interview, which I haven't made it to an interview yet. But that also, even the preparation for the interview is just so intense in the sense of it's very exciting. It's high risk, high reward kind of thing. And then when you win a big project, it just, we work so hard for, it was 2 months, or sometimes it's longer if it's a bigger project. It's very rewarding, but that would also be a big change from early on in your career. You're focusing on trying to get the technical knowledge, trying to network with your own staff, trying to get to know other people, because even in consulting, you're kind of your own firm. Like, you also want to do a good job so that other people want to work with you is kind of the thing too. And then after that, highly recommend going into the sales. If you're extroverted, it's a really good spot where you can shine those skills too. And let's see, what else did I have? Oh, I guess the other thing would be, there is a pretty flexible schedule. I mean, there's no set time of when you show up or when you leave. It's pretty flexible. I don't even know. I mean, there's people who, now it's like working from home is different, but there were people who had previous engagements and they would start at like 10 a.m. or there's other people who really like to start early. So it definitely varies. Let's see. And I guess my day-to-day, similar to Brittany, there's a lot of coordination at the beginning of the day, trying to manage multiple projects. There's a lot of check-ins with different groups. But I would say I try to block out time to work specifically on a project, because in consulting, you do have a lot of projects that you're working on, or pursuits that you're working on, that it's hard to get things done if you don't plan them out. So a good chunk of my day will go to meetings, coordinating people, but then also I'll dedicate, an hour on this pursuit. Now I have to think about or I have to figure out who I think would be really great to present to in this proposal, and gather all the resumes. Maybe I need to tailor them. And then another part of the day might be, okay, we have the drawings. Let me go back and check that anything I marked up that should have been done is done now. Oh, we have to add this new pipe in, so now I have to do a calculation as well. And so there's some exposure to different modeling software as well. And then sometimes part of my day too with consulting firms, and I don't know if this is also at public agencies, but for example, Brown and Caldwell has what they call employee network groups within. So there's a specific group for women at BC, and it's just a place, almost like it's a blog essentially, where women at our company, and not anyone can join it. We can share resources or books or advice, and we have monthly meetings and things like that. One of our newest ones is more of an equity and inclusion group, and there's been a lot of really great discussion, especially this past year with all the events that have happened. And within consulting too, I think it's been really great that there's also the engineering, the sales, but there's been budget or resources allocated for this type of networking that's so important even within a company, because we're all so different. We all face different challenges. There's some people who work in offices that only have one young person, even in that, and it's just been a really great way for us to connect. So I don't know if this happens in public agencies too, but I've heard from other friends at other companies, consulting firms, that they have something similar as well. So it helps with the culture of any company to be exposed to things like that too. So part of my day sometimes will be like planning for that, or because I am involved in some of those groups as well. Let's see. So I'll go to questions. Oh, BNR. What is a BNR? It's a biological nutrient removal system. So it's a secondary treatment system, and it's for nitrogen removal. And then sometimes you compare it with other technologies downstream to have phosphorus removal as well. But it's basically trying to save more space and get your nutrient removal to meet regulations. And what was it that you liked about this project? It was very hands-on, and I got to work a lot with the operators on site. So I would be out there once or twice a week and with another Brown and Caldwell engineer, and we spent the whole day working with the treatment operators. So any pilot studies, they would be helping us get the samples. They would be right there. So I really enjoyed that, hearing from their end what was important for them to be incorporated once it finally got designed. And yeah, it kind of gave me a little insight of, very tiny insight of the job of an operator too. And let's see, Leslie, when you started at Brown and Caldwell, did you already have experience with modeling software or anything, or any software you needed to know, or did you learn it on the job? I learned it on the job. There's a lot of great trainings in our office. There's also a lot of people who are very experienced with it. There's also within our company blogs for the specific software where you can reach out to experts if you have any questions. So I came in cold. Some people come in with bio inexperience, but it wasn't expected. And let's see. I love to participate in member associations like, oh yeah, I forgot to say this, PNCWA, Engineers Without Borders, WEF. Considering your busy schedule, are these things you have found time to do? Has your private consulting firm been supportive of these ventures? So yes, I am a part of Engineers Without Borders. I unfortunately haven't quite gotten to participate yet in our local Clean Water Association. I mean, I attend meetings, but not as a board member or anything like that. But with Engineers Without Borders, and then I also am a tutor for a high schooler for Girls Inc., which is this really great nonprofit geared towards underrepresented minorities, helping them basically get engaged in STEM and build the confidence. So with both of these, specifically with Engineers Without Borders, Brown and Caldwell is very, very supportive. Our CTO was at a time a member of the Engineers Without Borders board, but there's also great benefits like when I traveled, Brown and Caldwell reimbursed me for my travel expenses. Yeah, there's a lot of crossover between Brown and Caldwell and EWB, so I really enjoyed that. And then also now too with Girls Inc. I heard about it through someone else in our Denver office and then got involved locally, but there's a lot of interest from people in our office to also get engaged, and that's also received a lot of support locally as well. Oh.
Can I ask you more about that experience of tutoring with Girls Inc.?
Yeah, so I don't know where they have all of their local organizations, but there's one near me in Oakland, and there's different, they go, I guess they help girls elementary to high school. Mm-hmm. And they have really great stats, and it can be anything, also not just STEM, but they also focus on like wellness and health, and it can also like sex education too. But I think the big driver is just to try to get the girls confident and exposed to different fields. So with tutoring, I signed up, they had me go through some training and some background checks, and I've been doing high school training with this girl, a 9th grader, remotely now. I didn't get to do it in person, so it's been a little challenging doing remotely, but they have great stats. All of the kids that are in the program, at least in Alameda, are from low-income families, and all of them like their newest report last year, all of the high schoolers went on to higher education. So it's definitely made a really great impact.
It does. I can tell you as a former high school teacher who worked with a lot of kids who were deemed at risk that this is one of the primary, it's like one of the most effective ways to help kids because
Early on.
Yeah, that role modeling piece and interactions and relationships really opens the world. Thank you. Thank
No
you.
problem. Highly recommend Girls League too if anyone's interested. I don't know what the situation is in Oregon, but and EWB too. I've had a really great time with both.
Yeah, thank you for recommending those.
Highly, highly recommend it. I went to Kenya a year ago. It's crazy to believe that was only a year ago. So we're trying to do a remote implementation of a well now because we can't travel. So also challenging. We'll see how that goes.
Thank you, Mary Lou.
Cool. And then, so if we don't have any more questions for Mary Lou, then we're going to move on to Roy. And just for just checking time, so I think Bruce's presentation, I think I have on here for about 30 minutes. And then we want to make sure we leave some time for Q&A, and then Sam's going to wrap us up with some resources. So I think we're good on time, but yeah, just cool. So yeah, Roy, you can go ahead and take over.
Okay, I'll be time conscious also. So I guess I want to start by saying this has been kind of interesting for me, just seeing the engineer perspective and just what you guys have gone through to get into where you're at in your career. So that's been definitely great for me. So and then I know Jacob has a pretty unique perspective on this, but I know I've heard a couple people mention about talking to your operators and that some of you guys have enjoyed that. And so for me personally, that's one of the things that I really like is working with the engineers that come out. Like working with Brittany was great, and that's one thing. Like her especially was trying to really incorporate operators into designs and into projects, and I think it makes a huge difference for the end result when operators and engineers work a little more closely. So sorry, I had to start with that. Anyways, my name's Roy. So I started in wastewater in 2014, and it's kind of what Haley had mentioned. Did you go find water, or water find you? And so I was unsure of what I wanted to do, and I was going for like a biological science degree. I knew I wanted to do something like kind of outside and with my hands and in the environment. And an acquaintance of mine was attending the same community college I was at, and he had mentioned, I asked him what he was up to, and he said he was in the wastewater program. I was like, wastewater? So I went and kind of looked into it and ended up completing the 2-year program, and I kind of overloaded on classes, and I finished it in a year because I was like, well, I can finish this pretty quick and then work, and then, you know, I thought about an engineering degree or like I said, a biological science degree. So I can finish this quickly and then work, and while I work, I can go to school. And I started in down the career path and in the program, and I just fell in love with wastewater, which is nerdy and dorky, but I'm kind of a wastewater geek. So that was kind of how I got into it, and so I would say it found me. But it's something that you know, growing up, you hear about engineers and you hear about you know, a doctor or something like that, but this is something that I never thought I would do, but I genuinely love to do. So after finishing school, I got on with my first job with a little lagoon outside of Salem, a lagoon system, and I was literally the only person that worked there. And so it was kind of, I didn't have anybody to train me, and I was kind of just thrown in. They needed an operator to run this plant, and so it was a learning experience and challenging at the same time. And you kind of have to do a lot of research, and I mean, I went through the school program, but you definitely, just like an engineer, you learn a lot in the industry after you get started. So I kind of taught myself, and I had another friend that was a little bit, had been in wastewater for a little bit, and so I'd always call and ask him questions. But anything from, solids loading to diurnal peaks, inflow and infiltration, that was a huge issue for us there. And so dealing with some of that there, and it was very, very, very underfunded. So trying to come up with solutions to solve problems was huge for me. So after about a year and a half, I had got my level 1 certification. And so at that point, I was the RC for that plant. And so now there was a whole nother aspect of I'm a year out of school, and I'm now responsible for this plant and like putting my signature on the TMR. So that was a big challenge for me. But anyways, I moved on to the city of Bend after about a year and a half, and Bend is kind of where I'm from also, and so that was like my dream spot. I didn't think I'd end up there so quick and early in my career, but since I've been here, it's been a whole nother learning and growing experience for me. And so I've got to work with older operators and engineers and consultants, and so it's really been great. I would say day to day, what I do is it's so diverse and can vary so much. I know Brittany had talked about wearing different hats, and I feel like at City of Bend, because we are smaller, we do tend to wear a lot of hats even as operators. Like I know at City Portland, they kind of are specialized and they do like one specific area, or City of Salem's that way. But we're doing everything from helping our maintenance department take apart pumps and replace bearings, to I've written process control strategies before, to I know one thing that I've really dove into here is our as-builts. I know a lot of times projects are done, and the engineers spend a lot of time looking at as-builts and plans, and basically things are built and now they have to be run. And so operators basically dive into trying to figure out how to run these pieces of equipment, and don't spend a lot of time looking at like the actual specific plans. And then time goes on, and they're like, oh, the older operators figure out how to work this piece of equipment, and they teach new operators. And so as older operators leave, that knowledge is lost, right? And so as an example, I just spent the last couple days going over plans for our digester, and just looking at what was actually the original design, loading rates and design, like piping schematic and flow design, just to see what it was built for, what it was designed for. And I found a scum line in our digester that I did not know was there. And so nobody had any idea what it was used for. It was just this line that the valve had never been opened, and we've had these foaming issues, and we were able to, after looking into the plans, we were able to actually help with some of that foam. So it was good. So that is just an example of, like, here anyway, that we do so much. I know somebody have a question? I'm sorry, were you raising your hand, Aaron? Okay.
No, I was high-fiving you. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting. So I know operationally, that's the other thing that we tend to do a lot is there's an issue and we'll go to like Brittany as engineer and say, hey, we're ready for a new boiler and maybe it's not budgeted for this year or whatever, or it's not going to happen. And so now we're trying to figure out how to make this work until we can actually afford, tell the project process, can go through the project process, and it takes a while. So that's another challenge.
I tried to get you as a boiler, and
I know you did.
I got denied.
You did great, Brittany. Anyway, so that's something we do from the operation side. I think for me, the other stuff that we do is we do our solid handling process, we do our aeration process, disinfection. We have a UV disinfection here, and so honestly, day to day, my day starts with coming in to talk to the other operators and supervisors about what the previous night held. So here we don't have 24-hour shifts. We have an operator on call. And so we basically spend the first 10, 15 minutes going over what alarms happened last night and what, if any piece of equipment went down over the evening, what the operator did. And so for me, one of the things that I did after starting here was really sit down and pay attention to some of that stuff, and then I'd go with an older operator and show me what you did so I can learn. And so I guess that's one thing that I would also say if you're new into the industry or just starting, that going with someone that has more experience and just learning from them, following them around. I'm assuming it's the same in engineering as it is like operation is. There's a lot of working knowledge that older engineers and older operators have and a lot of experience, and you can really gain a lot from just learning from that. So but yeah, anyways, going on through the day, it could then use sample collection. I know that's huge. I know Mary Lou talked about doing that with operators, and another an example of working with engineers that I have actually is our dewatering equipment is a belt filter press, and for years and years and years we've actually had a lot of trouble with it, and so that's our older solids handling. The new one's coming thanks to Brittany. So our older solids handling is a belt filter press, and we've had trouble with it for years, and so we actually had some polymer reps and a couple engineers come out, and I spent a lot of time with them kind of going through the process, and not very many have had a lot of success here, but just from what I was able to learn from them, we've been able to improve our process significantly. So that's another way just engineers and operators can work together, and operators can learn from engineers. And I think that you guys have explained that engineers definitely can learn from operators. So what else I got? So I think I talked a little bit about what I get out of work. I guess I would say that my favorite part of what I do is probably the problem solving. So I've talked about just so many different problems, and there's always something new happening, and always something that needs to fix or needs tweaked or needs rearranged, or maybe something was engineered and there was a miscalculation or it wasn't quite right, and so the finished product doesn't quite work as intended. And so now as the operator, we have to figure out how to work with what's built and work around that defect or issue. And so that's just another part. Sorry, I'm kind of getting off the rails. I was talking about what I do during the day. So sample collection is another big part of our job. So doing that, taking and analyzing the data from the sample analysis. We as the operators don't really do the analysis part, or the sample analysis. We just basically take the numbers. we get from the laboratory, and we're looking at a lot of that stuff. So I know like City of Salem, I think City of Portland, they actually have analysts that are kind of, that's their job, is to look at that data, and whereas the operators here have to be pretty knowledgeable about the process control and actually make the adjustments to the process, and each and every operator does that here. So
hey Roy, I don't want to cut you off too soon, but we have a couple questions in the chat, and I just want to make sure we have enough time to get to those.
okay,
So
yeah, I can
it was just last thoughts, and then
okay, yeah, I can do that.
Questions.
I know one thing I didn't really touch on is my certification and how I got to where I'm at. And so I actually started a grant at the Small Lagoon and got my level 1. I didn't get my level 2 until I got to City of Bend. And because of the pathways that Jacob talked about, I was able to get my level 3 after a couple of years, and I've been at City of Bend almost 5 years, and I just got approved for my level 4 to take that test. So that's, I think that was huge. What Jacob talked about is getting your certifications and trying to progress your career in that way is really important. So go ahead, questions, what do we got?
Cool. So first one is from Mary Martin, and she's saying, when working with operators to collect data from models/designs, what do you appreciate from the engineers?
I would say what I appreciate is just kind of like Mary Lou's B&R that she worked on. It's just asking them from, you know, what other projects have they worked on? Have they seen a sludge like ours before? So when we're looking at models and design, they're like, for us particularly, like, man, your sludge is very unique. I've never seen something like this before. Or your primary sludge is a different color than I'm used to seeing. So that's something I really appreciate about engineers, is they really get to see a lot more, especially consultants. They get to see a lot more than an operator does, for sure. But just even a city engineer, because I'm used to my plant, and so I just basically get to see that, and we don't get to get outside and travel to other plants very much. And so that's something I really appreciate, is just learning from that and gaining from that insight that they have. I just saw that.
And then next is from Leslie Martinez, and she's saying, as operators, do you play a role in outreach to the public to understand wastewater treatment plants and how to help operation and maintenance? For example, do's and don'ts of what to flush.
Yeah, actually, we do. I actually made a video for because we used to give tours out here, and because of the last year and everything that's happened with COVID, the kids weren't able to come out, and so we made a tour video. And actually, I was tasked with making the tour video. That's one of the I've been here long enough that I understand what's going on, but I'm also at the bottom end of the pecking order, so I sometimes get the funner, more fun jobs, which actually I like because I get to learn. So but yeah, so I made a public outreach video that basically is like a virtual tour and kind of talks about do's and don'ts of what to flush and what not to flush, and kind of what wastewater is. So
nice. And then Mary is asking, is there a procedure for documenting that institutional knowledge from veteran operators?
There hasn't been in the past. Actually, when I got here, or right before I got here, I guess it had just changed, but there was a spiral notebook that was notes were written in, and that was our daily log. And so now we have a lot of now it's on the computer, and so it's like a OneNote notebook, and basically we as operators write in it every day, and actually just started doing my own to kind of document things that I've done personally to solve problems during the day and what we found. So like the scum line that I found on the data, that's something that was documented in there, and you can include, you know, I took as-built and kind of included those with that finding, and so it's all in kind of a note. So was there? No, we're working on it.
Yeah, I work over at City of Portland, and yeah, there's a lot of information that's like, oh, go ask Jim, he knows it all.
Yep.
So
So that was
Um,
huge too. There was nobody here except for one operator that was getting ready to retire that knew what all of the water valves in the plant, how to isolate our reused water in the plant, which is a big system for us. And so that was one of the first things I did when I got on, is figured that out. So
nice. And then last question is from Mary Lou, asking what your new dewatering technology is.
oh, we are getting a centrifuge.
Nice. What brand?
Flotweg, right, Brittany?
Mhm.
Ooh, cool. We did a pilot dewatering project, or I did recently with Truckee Meadows, actually. Well, I guess a year ago now. And they ended up liking Flotweg the most.
Really?
Yeah, they have EBPR, and so they have BioP sludge. I don't know if that's why your sludge is disgusting, you said, Brittany.
We
It's
do nitrogen removal, but we are not doing phosphorus removal.
Not yet. Okay.
it's
Yeah,
just
they have really tough sludge too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. We've had a lot of engineers and consultants come out to look at our sludge, and it's nobody's solved the puzzle yet.
we sent a sample to a sludge specialist in Germany that does like the whole world sludge, and yes, and she even told us it was the worst sludge she's ever seen.
Whoa, just the dewaterability of it, or the smell, or what is it?
Yeah, like on a good day we got like 15% dewatered.
That's how Truckee Meadows was too, actually. So.
But like average of like what 11 or 12. It was.
Mm-hmm. So how have they started working using using it?
Yeah.
They haven't gotten the Flotweg yet, but because they do phosphorus removal, so we also have a master plan project going on with them, and the master plan project identified like, hey, maybe you should try to dewater your secondary sludge separately from your primary sludge, and they've seen a huge difference in a huge improvement in dewaterability. But
yeah, that was one of the weird things for the City of Bend sludge, is that the primary sludge dewatered almost as bad as the secondary sludge.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
I know.
Yep.
That would be such a cool project to look into as a consultant. Who are your consultants around here?
We'll have to figure out about it sometime, all three of us.
Just talk to Brittany. She knows all about it.
Cool.